The mother, December Mitchell, and stepfather, Jonathan Mitchell, were arrested and charged with tampering and fabricating physical evidence with intent to impair human corpse, a second-degree felony.
A 26-year-old man with special needs was found buried in his own backyard, and police say it was his own parents who put him there. Jonathan Kinman's body was discovered after a welfare check in Texas, and a newly unsealed search warrant reveals shocking details about what allegedly happened inside that home. From his mother's apparent haunting on-camera admission to a cleared-out room that smelled of decomposition to social media posts that raised alarm, we are going to break down these latest developments in this disturbing case with homicide detective Eric Barnes. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, we're diving into this shocking and sad new case out of Texas, where police say a 26-year-old man with special needs was found buried in his own backyard. His name was Jonathan Kinman, and investigators say it was his own mother and stepfather who put him there. A search warrant lays out these new details about what police say may have really happened inside of that Burleson home. From what police found in Jonathan's room to what his mother allegedly said as cadaver dogs closed in, discovering his body. Her words reportedly caught on police camera. They are absolutely haunting. Quote, "I did this. This was my decision. I'm sorry. I just wanted him close to me." Yet even with that startling revelation, there are so many questions in this case that currently remain unanswered. For example, how long had Jonathan been gone before anyone noticed? Why did his parents allegedly bury him instead of reporting his death properly? How did he even die in the first place? What exactly happened inside that home in the days leading up to this? And we're going to attempt to answer those questions as best as we can as we break down what's inside this warrant, how this seemingly quiet suburban home turned into the center of a heartbreaking discovery in North Texas. And what's hard to wrap your head around with this kind of case is how normal everything seemed. At least from the outside, neighbors are reported saying that December and Jonathan Mitchell, okay, the parents here, they were friendly. They were the kind of couple who waved over the fence, hosted weekend get-togethers. But as of now, and this is pretty remarkable, we couldn't find any neighbor who has gone on the record and said that December had a son living there, that they didn't know this, that a 26-year-old man named Jonathan Kinman, and Jonathan, by the way, had special needs. He had this rare genetic disorder called Russell-Silver syndrome. It's a condition that affects how your body grows. But on October 14th, that's when everything changed. Everything changed with a welfare check. That day, according to a release from Burleson police, they were called to the home on White Oak Lane to check on Jonathan because officers were told that he might have died and that his body could be buried somewhere on the property. The way this all unfolded was apparently he had a family friend who contacted police after seeing a Facebook post from December Mitchell claiming that her son had died. So when officers reached out, Mitchell apparently told them that Jonathan had passed away at a local hospital. But as investigators checked her story, they didn't find any record of that. Then later, that same evening, Jonathan's stepfather apparently calls 911, and that is when police returned to the home with the cadaver dogs and they began searching the property. The next day, October 15th, that is when police, with the help from the Texas Rangers, uncovered this shallow grave near a shed behind the house. Inside, they find Jonathan's body wrapped in a camouflage blanket. So both of them were arrested on the spot. They were charged with tampering with physical evidence with intent to impair a human corpse. And at this point, investigators say the cause of death is still pending. The Tarrant County Medical Examiner is waiting on final autopsy results. So there are questions. There are a lot of questions. So aside from how just on earth something like this could happen, how long had Jonathan been gone before police were alerted? How did he die? What was going on? Well, as I mentioned, there are these newly unsealed search warrants that are shedding light on those final days. What police say Jonathan's parents told them, what they found inside the house, what was captured on camera the night that everything came crashing down. This is a horrible story. It's a horrible story, but we didn't want it to be put on the wayside. We definitely wanted to bring attention to this. And the reason that we can do that is because we get this amazing support from our sponsor, Upside. Now, this is the free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, food. It's great. I want to tell you about it. So I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why wouldn't I want to get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is actual, real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. Once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app. You get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. So to help break all of this down, I want to bring on Detective Eric Barnes. Detective, thanks so much for taking the time to come back here on Sidebar. Sorry this is the case we're talking about, but I mean, this is a strange one because in cases where you have a vulnerable person, a vulnerable adult who is suspected of being harmed by their own family, it is a different kind of case, right? It is a different kind of case for investigators, maybe looking for what kind of signs they can. What stood out to you so far about this story?
I think the first thing that jumped out to me, Jesse, was the fact that they received a tip. So that right away let me know that there was someone that had a moment of weakness that was involved with this, that actually leaked the information out. So that's great for the detectives because they actually have an independent party that has knowledge of some of the facts of this case, which is going to help the investigators kind of unravel everything.
And the fact that, I mean, it's being reported, that no neighbor, as of right now, knew that they had a son there, that, they, let alone maybe even had a son, but their son was there. What does that tell you?
It means they kept a pretty low profile. Either he was confined to the house or he's been in the backyard for a very long time.
And when you have a vulnerable person, whether it's a child, a baby, or you have somebody who has special needs, there does become a complication in terms of, that person actually being able to speak out for themselves or report or something of that nature. That's where I do think when you have a vulnerable victim, it can get complicated.
100%. Detectives on this case are going to have to take their time. You have obvious signs of foul play right off the bat, and you can't let it overcloud your judgment because it could be something very simple, but on the other hand, it could be something that's very complicated. So they're going to have to take their time with this one, and they can't rely. They're going to have to independently develop all of their information outside of what the husband and or the wife say, because they could be parties to the offense.
And to be clear, they're only right now charged with this tampering count, right? That could escalate once we know what the cause of death is. Are you surprised they haven't been charged at this point with murder or manslaughter or some sort of homicide charge, or is it too early?
In my opinion, it's definitely too early. I think at this point, they're going to have to rely on very heavily on what the medical examiner rules. They're going to have to lean on science. There's going to be a whole lot of dots getting connected outside of the office for them to come back with this, being that it could have been a significant amount of time since all of this took place. Science is going to be the way that leads the investigation.
And we don't know the state of the body, right? That could complicate it too.
100%. Being that the body was actually placed underground, there's a whole lot of things that go with body breakdown and just the science part. So again, what the medical examiners rule, law enforcement is going to follow suit with medical examiner.
What are ways, if you arrive at a crime scene where you have a buried body, what are the steps you take to preserve that evidence, confirm the victim's identity? Because that's a very delicate scene.
Whenever the body is exhumed, everything actually, the body itself and then the soil around it actually becomes part of your crime scene. So you have to be very delicate, very careful with it, not to disturb it any more than it's already going to be disturbed from removing it from the ground. There may be something that's in the dirt beside the ground that may be a clue that may help lead law enforcement in a different direction. So everything in the immediate area and surrounding areas of the corpse is going to be very heavily weighed into the investigation.
There was this other aspect that I mentioned, that the cadaver dogs helped investigators find Jonathan's body. How reliable are those dogs in locating buried remains and maybe other, evidence?
Well, I'll tell you this, when it comes to law enforcement work and canines are highly reliable. I kick my partner out of the car 7 days a week for a canine to ride next to me. A cadaver dog is very, very specific. They can pick up scents of decomposition miles away from the actual burial site. So they're highly reliable, and it's a very needed piece in this investigation.
And there's so many weird parts about this. The idea that a Facebook post is what helped start this investigation, just taking it back to where you brought it up. How important is social media? How important is community observation in starting an investigation, uncovering hidden crimes?
You know, in the age of social media, any information that is out there is going to be put out. You know, once it's put on social media, you never know who it's going to contact. So there could have been people that had heard something strange or maybe noticed something a little weird. And so now with that post, you know, the wheels start turning and pieces of the puzzle start to connect. It generates outside conversation. And before you know it, you know, people can say, hey, if it's quacking and it walks like a duck, it is a duck.
Yeah. I want to go into these newly unsealed search warrant affidavits. They provide more information. They were obtained by WFAA and NBC5. They basically paint a disturbing picture of what investigators say happened inside the Mitchell home in the days leading up to the discovery of Jonathan's body. And we mentioned earlier that police first learned of Jonathan's possible death after this family friend reached out reporting a Facebook post from December Mitchell. And she had claimed that her son had died at Texas Health Hughley Hospital. This is a claim that investigators looked into. They determined it wasn't true, it was false. And when investigators checked, the hospital had no record of it. There was no paperwork, there was no documentation, nothing. That's when police realized that something wasn't adding up. Mitchell then reportedly calls police. And Mitchell also reportedly told police that she wasn't going to hold a funeral, saying that Jonathan would be cremated. Admitted that she had no documentation of his passing. How much of a red flag is that, Detective?
That's a huge red flag. You know, the silver lining in all of it is that she's actually already created a narrative, one that you can easily prove is false. With one phone call to the hospital, you know, you're able to determine, is there a record of death for this individual at the hospital? And once they tell you no, now that just opens the floodgate. And at that point, she becomes the first person of interest in this investigation.
Shock? I mean, is that an excuse? Hey, I was shocked. I wasn't thinking clearly. I don't know what I was saying. I was confused. In your experience interviewing people, is that a fair explanation?
I think that one is very thin. I think that that was, in my opinion, it looked like what she was trying to create was an alibi for his death and for his disappearance, creating an illusion that, you know, he passed away and that he's no longer here. There's nothing here that is foul play. It's just a very natural situation. And so I think she was throwing bait out there and hoping that people would bite it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe it either. I think the idea of if she said cremation, that's problematic because that would go to, well, where's Jonathan's body? Oh, well, there you go. That's why it's not there, as opposed to it being buried in the yard. I mean, that specific detail about mentioning cremation, prosecutors would say it's pretty incriminating.
I agree 100%. And, you know, burying a loved one in a backyard, I wouldn't say that it's never happened before, but it's highly odd and very uncommon for someone to do that. It seems very in line with you're trying to get something done without raising red flags, without raising a lot of attention to your situation. So I think that all of the signals point towards that there's some foul play in this one.
And was it surprising to you that police followed up on that? What do I mean? You know, if parents say, you know, their child died and they died at the hospital, when would police actually follow up on that and look at the hospital and see if there were records there, as opposed to just taking the family's word for it?
Well, you know, as we said earlier, being that it was posted on social media, I believe people close to the family, people that were in the community around the family and just kind of in the loop of things going on with them probably picked up on that there was something that was weird going on here. And I think there's a little bit more to the story that, you know, that is added in by people that were in the loop, which would help police kind of follow up on it. I think the post alone is enough to cause suspicion, but when you start adding outsiders who may have some more information, I think those facts alone will force you to figure out, okay, where is the child? Maybe he's at the house harmed or something. So it's definitely something that you have to follow up on.
I thought the timeline was interesting too, because you have later that evening, and we mentioned this, that Jonathan's stepfather is the one who called on 911. He reportedly told authorities that he learned that his wife had buried her boy in the backyard. It's unclear when exactly he says he learned this, but according to NBC5, the warrant describes how a family friend had basically warned the couple that if they didn't call police, he was going to do so. That's an interesting tidbit to this detective.
I think so too. I think that the outside information, that is going to be very valuable to this case. Just figuring out when the information was exchanged, that timeline is going to be huge in piecing this case together. And I think that once you look at it, if you have an extended timeline where between the Facebook post, the time that the neighbor was notified, and then the neighbor coming forward and say, "Hey, either you do the right thing or I will," is going to weigh very heavily in the future charges on this case.
And to be clear, even though they're both charged, and I don't know this for sure, you do wonder if there's the beginning of, I had no idea what she was doing. She told me this. I didn't know. Now, how successful is that? What do I mean by that? I mean, how often do you see that where one caregiver or one parent is saying, I had no idea what my wife was doing. I had no idea what my husband's doing. Then again, if you think about the allegations here that they, buried this 26-year-old in the backyard, again, I'm not sure this is where the defense is going to go, but it may be hard to believe that she was able to just do this on her own, right?
100%. What you would typically see when there's multiple parties to any crime is that one party will definitely start minimization, wanting to kind of water down their roles. And typically when that starts happening, you see a separation between the two parties, and where one party will be a little more culpable than the other. And as an investigator, you want to kind of exploit that. It's actually working in their favor that these two individuals maybe separating themselves from what their roles were, because you can play them against each other.
And there's another aspect to this that's incredibly disturbing, because as police and the cadaver dogs, they were searching the property, and I want your opinion about what you think this means and how it plays into the investigation. December Mitchell was reportedly caught on the patrol car camera saying to her husband, "It was all me. That dog was going in to find him." And in a statement that was reportedly captured by police, she says, "I did this. This was my decision. I'm sorry. I just wanted him close to me." Now, detective, I just said it might be hard to believe one is responsible, one's not. What do you take away from those statements?
Those statements are they're pretty damning. I think that definitely, until you have any facts to point you otherwise, you have to take them as being, pointing you in the right direction of who had the most involvement. Now, I do believe also that there's been some time that could have passed between the actual incident that causes death and also the burial, which could help you kind of distinguish, okay, there definitely was enough time that two parties would be able to create a story. So I think there's going to take some deep digging. Also, like I said, you're going to have to spend some time speaking with each individual to get their accounts, and then go back and try to corroborate that information.
By the way, assuming that she made this statement and assuming she didn't know it was being recorded, how many times do you see that? How many times do you see suspects saying things that are caught on dash cam camera or body camera, and I guess the person doesn't realize it?
It happens pretty commonly. That's what we call an excited utterance, where a situation is very heavy, and in the heat of passion of the moment, you make a statement and it's unsolicited. It just comes out because of stress. And I think that's what the statement sounds like. It sounds like she was super stressed out, really felt like she had lost control of the situation, and the only thing left for her to do was for her to say something, and ultimately it ended up being recorded.
Let me talk about what was found inside the home. So the affidavit says that investigators noticed that Jonathan's room appeared completely cleared out. There are items that had been removed. The mattresses reportedly showed signs of and smelled like human decomposition, according to NBC5. Hair follicles were collected from the scene for forensic testing and analysis. DNA samples were taken from Jonathan Mitchell as part of the investigation. What are you expecting happens there, detective, and what does this tell you?
What it sounds like is that law enforcement was playing everything by protocol. Typically in these investigations, the standard in which you start the investigation is you work it as if it's a murder. Treat every death as if it's a murder. And in that way, you check all the boxes, you complete the forensic side of it, And then you can kind of scale down if needed. But in this case, where you have an individual that could have been missing for months, um, it's a situation where you have to take everything step by step. You have to be slow and methodical with your process. And again, you have to treat it as if you don't have any witnesses and see where the evidence leads you.
Let's say there's a complication with the actual body, right? Jonathan's body, and you can't determine cause of death. How much can the scene, how much can the room tell you? Whether cause of death, manner of death, time frame, right? How long he's been dead for. You wonder what evidence could be found there that might help lead to answers.
What I would be interested to see is typically like, situations like this when you're searching a scene or you're searching a room, you want to see if there's maybe some blood stains. Also look for any bodily fluids that may be out of place in this room. And definitely if you are able to find bodily fluids, how much bodily fluids? Is it going to be something that would be uh, consistent with a small cut, or does someone get seriously injured here? And I think all of those things are going to factor into the police kind of piecing this puzzle together from behind the scenes.
There's something else that I want to talk about here as well. So you have December's post, the one that reportedly alerted a family friend into seeking the welfare check. That wasn't the only one that was apparently made online. So authorities say Jonathan's stepfather shared his own message about the loss sometime before police arrived to the home for the welfare check. His message that was apparently posted on October 14th at 6:35 p.m. reads, "So even at your strongest, certain things can make a man, a father, and friend break you down to your core. I loved you so much more than I can express, even if I didn't always show it. But my heart is broken in pieces right now, and I cannot contain the hurt I'm feeling for you right now. I know you're in a better place, but it still hurts." Detective, what do you make of that?
The post is coming off, it's giving the vibe that a individual has lost someone very close to them. And I think as a detective and the law enforcement agency that's investigating this, it's very important to follow up on that statement. I need to speak with the stepfather independently. I need to talk with him to figure out what was going on during that time period. And also, again, that post is another valuable piece to kind of cement this timeline and to determine if when in fact he was actually buried in the backyard, because I think that there's a lot of answers, a lot of time has passed since then. So I think that in order to get a clearer timeline on this, you have to nail down the facts, and that post is a great starting point.
And I want to go back to something else, just because it's so shocking. I want to shift gears and talk about this particularly troubling incident. I mean, so much of it is, but what the neighbors knew, right? Or what they didn't know. Up until last week, this couple next door, December and Jonathan Mitchell, they seem like, as I mentioned before, perfectly normal, friendly neighbors. Betty Noyola, who lives nearby, told CBS Texas, "We've talked to them in the backyard. We've talked to them in the front yard. We've seen them out there having parties. They know that my kids come over every Sunday for dinner." And when police showed up at the Mitchell's door on October 14th for a welfare check, no one had any idea what was happening inside that home. Noyola said, "Never have we ever saw the kid. Never did she ever mention that there was one. We never saw anybody come in and go with them. All they ever talk about is their daughter and their granddaughter." Again, Detective, we talked about it, how that might be significant. But also, the neighbors here do play a role. They are important witnesses. And you also goes back to this idea of, if they really did commit this crime and maybe other crimes, how many times do you interview people that know the suspects and say, this is like, comes out of nowhere. This is a 180. The face they put to the public is completely different from what they're accused of.
I think that's pretty typical. What it appears is that they completely altered their pattern of life, and went into a separate mode of trying to create a certain lifestyle and project a certain lifestyle. And it looked like they moved past the point of even acknowledging that, that they had a son. And I think that is very huge to hear that from the neighbors, to hear the shock, because you're talking about someone first person that has experienced them living their lifestyle, has even been over to their home. And like you said, that paired with the fact that the room had been cleared out, gives the impression that the incident had happened and they were moving on to the next phase of their life. And had it not been for that tip, who knows where we'd be.
And police are probably interviewing these neighbors for any sign. Did you see anybody moving? Did you hear anything, right? If this all happened, if we're talking about this house in the backyard, these neighbors, again, I imagine they're being interviewed by law enforcement. These neighbors are probably being questioned in the last few months about anything they might have thought was not significant at the time, but maybe significant now, right? I mean, how do those interviews go?
100%. Like those interviews are going to be very detailed because they are going to be your eyes and ears for the investigator. Anything that stands out now, maybe now even knowing these circumstances, what you figured out today, and with law enforcement being here, looking back over the last few months, has there been anything that just stands out to you that is out of the normal with this situation? Any times you've even questioned them on certain things and maybe their answers or responses weren't right? All of those are going to play a huge factor in this because when you line them up, witness by witness, neighbor by neighbor, again, I think you're going to get a large piece of the puzzle that indicates there was something going on here.
And Detective Barnes, one of the reasons I also wanted to have you on, aside from your incredible, expertise in this area and what we should be thinking about, is I'm sure, unfortunately, you've had a lot of conversations with victims' family members, deceased family members. So Jonathan's father's family, the Kinmans, released a statement, and they call this situation, quote, a living nightmare. They say, "We were horrified to hear the news about our precious Jonathan. This is a living nightmare for the Kinman family. Please know that we are in full cooperation with law enforcement, and we will fight for every last ounce of truth and justice to come to light for the sake of our sweet boy." Also, by the way, the Center for ASD in Burleson, which provides services to the special needs community, they released a statement expressing concern, writing, "Though the Center for ASD did not know Jonathan, our hearts go out to his family and friends. We cannot speculate as to what happened, but we know that this individual deserved better. As a community, as a city, and as a state, we need to show up better for this vulnerable population. 17-year wait lists for services and programs that are constantly running out of funding should not be the normal. Living life with a special needs loved one is lifelong, and we need to recognize that and provide support to them and their families. Our loved ones get older, and their needs change. They don't just go away." Now, Detective, let me ask you this. What do you say to this family? If you were investigating this case, what do you say to this family? And also, what information can you share with them?
I can tell you that I know for me, dealing with the families of your victims is it's very delicate and it's a tough situation. Um, my conversation with this family would be simply, just give me some time. You have to have time because I want to make sure that I get it right for Jonathan and for you guys as well. This family is in a situation where they've definitely been victimized. It's tough for anyone to lose a loved one, but for other family members to be implicated or have some role and not at this point not be clear as to all the details. It's just a horrible situation and my heart goes out to them. But my plea for them would just be simply, please let me get some time to work these things out. And I would definitely keep a very tight communication with this family. I would want to keep them in the loop, obviously, because, with the coverage, I want to make sure that if anything comes out, that they hear it from me first. So we definitely will have open communication, and I would definitely want to keep them updated on every information as it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Really tough to think about. Well, right now, December and John Mitchell, they remain behind bars at the Johnson County Jail on a $250,000 bond. Detective Eric Barnes, thank you so much for taking the time. It was great to see you.
Thanks, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.